Hello and welcome to this week of Neuro Natters. We've got Steve and Jeanette with us and we've got our cups of tea ready. So today we're going to look at what does it mean to have an ADHD assessment. So over to you, Steve.
Okay, so it's a strange process, really. Kind of, it's a bit different for everybody because we want to give a personal journey for everyone. But it starts off with those basic screening questions, kind of looking at how those core symptoms of hyperactivity, impulsivity, and inattention affects you. Because it's a medical diagnosis, we have to ensure that we meet the DSM-5 criteria. And what that is, that's the guidelines in which we come up with clinical diagnoses. And in there, it's got five kind of different core outcomes. And outcome A looks at those three areas. And as we do the SNAP scores, which is how many different criteria or how many different signs and symptoms you have under each one, you need a minimum of six in each of those core areas. So that's kind of criteria A. We then move on to, was it present before the age of 12? So because this is a neurological, because this is a neurodivergent condition, sorry, from birth, we have to make sure that it's been present there your whole life. And actually, most people can easily sit there and go, at school, I really struggled. I was always getting told off. My parents were always telling me off. I was always the class clown. Something was always going on. Um, so that would then give that tick in the box there. Um,
What happens
we,
if you've got a child which is quite quiet? I'm just thinking about my own, which is in the middle in the classroom, doesn't get picked up, they're shy, the teacher barely knows the name, and you ask them to fill the form in because it goes to the Sencone and they're in secondary school and they just fill it out, and there's no evidence apart from they's quiet or shy
Because they're compliant and just
yeah,
blend into the background.
and
and
mask
this
it.
is a real problem because the next criteria is it present in more than two locations? So if you are that golden child at school, but the moment you come home, you escalate and you flare up, we really need that strong narrative from the parents to go, well, look, I appreciate the fact that my school's not picking this up, but the moment they come out of school, they're a different child. And that's because they've been masking, they've been holding that in all day. The mask comes off and this behaviour flares up or escalates. And that's not to say all children are like that, but a lot of children are like that, or a lot of people like that. So we dysregulate a bit more. Equally, we have that different, there's those differences between boys and girls where boys we're really lazy, we're going to tell you what we're thinking and feeling. Girls, on the other hand, will hold it in, they're going to carry that weight a bit more. So we're trained to kind of look out for those things, and there's ways that we can assess that and work that out. And equally, it depends on the type of ADHD because there's three types of ADHD. So what you're describing there, Helen, might be that inattentive type, the one that's quiet, withdrawn, more inwards. So therefore, they're not the classic, which is that kind of combined diagnosis where they're hyper, they're lacking that focus, and they're impulsive. So again, we look at the different types of presentations that might be. After that, we look at kind of, does it impact your daily functioning, your activities, your concentration? And most people who are coming to see us, they're here because they've hit that crisis, they've hit that brick wall, they're tired of this, working twice as hard and like pushing water up a hill and it's just not working. So that criteria is normally done well. And then finally, we look at the last criteria, which is, does any other disorder explain this diagnosis? And this is really, really important because everybody thinks, oh, I've got this condition, but actually, it could be a processing disorder. It could be dyslexia. It could be dyslexia and or autism. It could be trauma and dyslexia looking like ADHD. So it doesn't have to be ADHD. And I know all these videos, everyone's going, have you got this? And everyone's ticking it off. But actually, it's not as simple as just ticking that off. We've got to have those criteria met. And we do that by the evidence, by the assessment tools that we use. So we use a range of assessment tools, and our assessment tools come from the NICE guidelines, which is the National Institute Care of Excellence guidelines, We use guideline N87 for those that want to go away and do a little bit of research. And in there, it tells us about the assessment process and what we should be looking for, who's allowed to conduct them, the licenses or the qualifications they should have, and that assessment process. It's important
Because
to
with
say, sorry?
I was just going to say, because one of your tests, because I've sat through one of your tests just to try the process, was a reaction test. And I have to say, it was the worst thing I've ever done because I just really struggled with the whole thing. So even if you don't have the evidence from the school, you have those sort
We
of
have
tests.
additional evidence, yeah.
I think it's really great.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was just about to go, which is not every centre does the same test. So there's no standardized, you must do this test. What we have is the nice guidelines, which is a framework that gives us an idea. So we must do a developmental history because that's where we get that from childbirth up, those problems. Um, there's a test called the QB test, which is that reaction test that you're talking about, and that's where you've got those stimuli coming on, and that's about how focused are you. And what it does is it tracks your micro movements, so how much you're bobbing your head, or if you're flicking your eyes, it'll pick that up and it draws a little chart. And then there's additional tests. So we can use, for example, if you've had a dyslexia assessment, we can use that evidence and cross it because it crosses over, because your assessment tools are similar to ours, where we're looking at processing and that working memory. So each person will do it slightly different. Our process is evidence-based. We base it all off the evidence.
And if you did it with ND pathways together, then we are working with you. So
It's
you've
all
had
combined,
the
yeah.
exit assessment first.
Yeah,
But
got
that
the full
information,
profile.
it's completely holistic. It's not seen as separate. It's part of the evidence.
No, absolutely. And it goes and/or, doesn't it? So if we do the ADHD assessment and we go, there's an and/or here in criteria E, we can go here. And I think what's important to say with ND is in all of the years that I've been doing this, it's never one diagnosis on its own. Very, very rarely is there just one. It is normally
We
this
find that.
and
We find that,
something.
Steve. So, do you have some sort of multidisciplinary team or a discussion around each
Absolutely,
case?
absolutely. So, as I said, first of all, we use recognised assessment tools that are clinically validated in England and across the world. They're recognised within the NHS, so we've got that strong clinical framework. And again, because I work within the NHS, I know exactly kind of the tools that we're using. And we never make a decision by ourselves because of that and or. So again, we've got our other clinicians that are there to look at those. Well, is this anxiety? Is this trauma? Is this depression? Because again, so many people get those labels and it's not those labels, which I can't tell you the amount of people that have been given the diagnosis of bipolar. And you're like,
Oh,
you
I've
haven't got
been,
bipolar. This isn't bipolar. You've got those highs and lows because you get that boost of energy and you want to be productive, and you have those lows because you haven't slept for 3 days and you're exhausted through all of that workout that you've been doing because you've not learned the skills to turn your brain off.
I've known someone to have 6 years of medication for that, and then they realised after talking to us actually that
So common at the moment. So,
Yeah,
so
it
common.
changes the world, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, what support can they get from you? Steve? What happens once you've given them a diagnosis? Is there any support there? Is there any counselling?
Really
Do you
good
offer anything
question.
else?
Yeah, really good question. So again, we go back to the nice guidelines, what the National Institute guidelines are, and they state that the first interventions are behavioural interventions. So we should be re-educating you about you've got this diagnosis, this is how it works for you, this is how you're going to think, this is how you're going to feel, because we've just shifted your whole thought process. We've given you this new diagnosis. And what tends to happen with people that get a diagnosis, they have this light bulb moment. You can see it changing them, and they go, "Yeah, yeah, that makes sense." So they need time to process that. So we then do a secondary thing called psychoeducation, so behavioural interventions and psychoeducation. And what that basically means is good quality information to help you understand where your struggles lie. And that goes back to the assessment tools we've used because they tell us your areas of weakness where you're really struggling, whether that's in the working memory or the emotional regulatory part. So we're able to give you those. And then finally, if those aren't really working, we will only then look at medication. We always do non-pharmacological interventions first. So we'll talk about kind of the ways you can manage this without pharmacology. But then if you need a prescription and we want to do pharmacology, then we'll do the psychoed around medicines, what medicines look like, what the different options are, and then you'll be put on the medication pathway. So
So
lots.
do you help families as well? Do you know, if suddenly you landed with a diagnosis and somebody's in denial, do you work with families?
Yeah, so on our website, we've got access to lots of tools. There's lots of videos on there, and there's a few workbooks that we've created that actually offer family interventions for family members to understand how to communicate, how to read their body language, how to understand the nuances. Because again, people will say, "Oh, you're really abrupt, you're really aggressive, or you're gaslighting me," which is the latest phrase. And actually, it's not. It's their communication style. It's just the way that they're trying to portray something to you. And if you accept it in that light and you don't think it's something else, then actually you don't end up with conflicts within families. So good communication strategies is really important because you then realize it's not personal. You're not, this isn't against me. We've just misread each other's lines of communication. And that's because we're thinking too quickly. We haven't had a chance
That's
to
really,
work through
it's
it.
really fascinating. So what we could really do with, I think, as well, is some co-regulation strategies, maybe, talk more about that. That'd be absolutely great
Yeah, I think
because
that's
we just,
definitely another day, right?
definitely another natter.
Yeah, because
Another
also
natter.
I know that you created programs for parents, a 4-week program if you've got
Yeah,
ADHD or autism, and also coaching sessions if you've just been diagnosed,
yeah.
which would be really good. So definitely check those out.
Yeah, and that goes back to those basic interventions, learning what it is to have this diagnosis, learning what those nuances are, learning why does my brain do that? Why do I keep losing my credit card 15 times in a year?
Please, phones.
Yeah, and what can I do to stop that from happening? What
Exactly.
little strategies can we
Yeah,
put in there?
exactly. And that's that working memory bit. And again, around lies and storytellings, people don't do it deliberately. It's just part of their impulsivity, or maybe part of a shield of shame that they're trying to hide from something that they don't want you to understand. So there's loads. I mean, we could talk forever on it. We really could. But
So is all this
people.
information on your website?
So there's lots of documents, lots of things. And once you've had a
Brilliant.
diagnosis from us, you get access to all of these tools. Yeah,
Fantastic.
and that's what this is, right? This is psychoed. We're giving you that kind of understanding.
Golden nuggets of how you might actually listen and go, oh, that's me. So then you
Yeah,
think, oh,
absolutely.
I know why I'm doing it. So yeah, so thank you everybody for today's session, and please come back and listen to us next week. Don't forget to click on the link below for information about Neuro Natters. We'll see you next week.
Bye,
Please
everyone.
do.
Good. Bye.